Hello, my name is Kendra Winchester. It is that most wonderful time of year here on BookTube where everyone talks about their favorite books or their best books or whatever list they choose to go with. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books and the books that I really enjoyed and would highly recommend. I will note that none of these have been shortlisted for the Reading Win Award, so I am taking those 12 books and setting them to the side, and they do not count because I can't play favorites with them, guys. Like we did announce a winner, but beyond that, you get my drift. So none of these books were on those lists. If you want to go check them out, I will link them down in the show notes. Those are also favorites, but these are favorites outside of that. So you just get more books, I guess. But I have limited to 7 books today in this video, and this includes backlists, so new to me books, as well as some books from 2018 that I really enjoyed and also wanted to highlight. So yeah, let's just jump in with the first book. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is Lisa Cross Smith's Whiskey and Ribbons. This is her debut novel out from Hub City Press. This is that's a press that's actually here in South Carolina, which is pretty cool. This book is sort of like a literary romance, and the fact that it's on this list is really special to me because I've been really struggling to get into romance, but I feel like this is a great gateway since Lisa Cross Smith, it's just so well written, but in a way that's accessible to those of us who are not as familiar with romance. I just think it's a beautiful story. So this story is set in Louisville, Kentucky, and Evangeline is a ballerina, and she is 9 months pregnant when her husband Eamon is killed in the line of duty. So we go like, I think 6 months later when she is living with her brother-in-law Dalton, and in the beginning of the book, like the first scene, like they kiss. And so it's this whole question of falling in love with someone after you've also lost someone. And it's just a beautiful story. And I listened to the audiobook, and each viewpoint character, Evangeline, Dalton, and Eamon, they each have their own narrator. And so that makes the audiobook especially amazing. So if you're gonna pick up this book, I would highly recommend the audiobook because one of my favorite audiobooks of the year, for sure. Some people talk about books, how as soon as they finish them, they wanted to start them over again. When I finished this book, that was one of those books for me. It's just an incredible story, and I hope more people pick it up, and I cannot wait to see what Lisa Cross Smith writes next. Next on my list is Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is her debut novel, and this is about a young girl living in Nigeria, and on the outside, her entire family looks perfect. Her dad is involved in many charities, he's a prominent member of their church, but at home he's very controlling and very physically abusive, so there is a trigger warning for that. This is a story about a girl coming of age, but it's also about a girl inspecting religion in a country that has a history of colonization but is also trying to come into its own. So you have her dad who practices religion and believes that the way white people practice it is the best way, but then you have her aunt who practices her faith as a Nigerian. She doesn't believe that the way white people do it is better. She does it with her own culture, and it's the way that that is handled I was very impressed with, and I'm just impressed about most things about this book except for the audiobook. I didn't like that, but the book is great. The book itself is great, and I can't believe this was her debut, but it was Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, so of course she's amazing. Of course. Was there any doubt? Another book on my favorites is this book, A Manual for Cleaning Women by Lucia Berlin, and Autumn has been raving about this book forever. This book is on my channel for various photos and different things, but it was one of Autumn's favorites, which is why it's there in the photos, but I had never read it before. I finally picked up a copy of this book and read it. Absolutely loved it. I keep thinking about the images in some of these stories. I mean, this collection's over 400 pages, but Lucia Berlin, she passed away several years ago, but this is like a reissue of a new collection of her short stories, I should say. So it was just so interesting to go back and read these stories by an amazing woman who was never recognized really in her lifetime for how great a writer she is. These stories do have an autobiographical nature, but she is kind of slippery. She turns around and changes things, and so I'm very interested to read her memoirs very soon and heard some of her letters to discover, like, okay, what was true about her life, actual life history versus these stories. I just can't get over this book and the images and the stories that she tells in this book. It definitely is a book that I want to reread very soon, but first I'm going to get through some of her other books, but definitely pick this one up if you haven't already. Alright, the next book on my list is Prairie Fires by Caroline Fraser, and this is a biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder. This book is just so incredibly good. I grew up with Laura Ingalls Wilder like most young women for the last few generations, and we're all pretty familiar with her books, which are like autobiographical fiction, and that's confusing. So this book is written in 3 parts. The first part is about what actually happened in Laura Ingalls Wilder's childhood. The middle part is like her marriage and middle years, and then the last section is mostly when she was writing the books. And we also learn more about Rose Wilder Lane and how horrible she is. But I just found that this book was incredibly well researched. It was very balanced. In the time when Laura Ingalls Wilder is finally being pointed out the issues with her books, like she's been romanticized and kind of put on this pedestal of almost sainthood of children's literature. But what Fraser does is she balances all of that and talks about Laura Ingalls Wilder's contributions to children's literature while also criticizing her for, justifiably so, the way that she's treated African American people and Native Americans in her work. And so I really appreciated that, because I think it's very difficult, especially with someone who's, you know, been gone for so long, to find that balance of appreciating what they've done but also critiquing them for their faults. So definitely go check it out. I've also done a more in-depth review here on BookTube, so I will link that down in the description box so you can hear more about this book if you would like. So the next book on my list is one, probably for me personally, the most important nonfiction book I read this year, and that is What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia. It's hard to talk about this book without talking about what it's partially in response to, and that is Hillbilly Elegy, which has a lot of problematic elements to it. But this book really looks at Appalachia and points out the history of how the media, the outside media, has covered Appalachia as an area. It also points out how big Appalachia is, how it's not actually a small segment of the country. It's huge, and it's multifaceted. It covers both north and south and everything in between, and how people discovering Appalachia and figuring out there are people there who may or may not need help and whatever has happened over and over. There were so many things in this book that I discovered. I mean, you look at how many tabs. I underlined something almost on every page, and it's a very short book, but it packs a lot of punch, and it also has lists of further reading and documentaries and other things you can watch as well, further media maybe, I should say, in the back. This is the book that I recommend to everyone who is doing the Reading Women Challenge. There's a prompt in there that says read a book set in or about Appalachia, and so this is the featured book because it gives you a starting point. If you're not familiar with Appalachia, or you don't understand why people don't like Hillbilly Elegy, this is a great place to go if you want answers to those questions. It's very concise and beautiful, and she's writing more books, and I'm so excited for that, and just go forth and read. I just love it so much. So the next 2 books are my favorite books outside of the Reading Women Award, which you could put that in the other section, but these 2 books are my favorite books of the year. And I couldn't decide between the 2 of them, so I have one front list and one back list, and that's the categories that we're going to go with. So the first one is Severance by Ling Ma. Now, I told you I would talk to you a little bit more about this book. I may need to do its own video. It is just a brilliant book about Candice Chen, and she is the daughter of Chinese immigrants, and she is trying to make her way in New York City. She is a millennial, why it's millennial pink, and she's working in publishing with like this wholesale business that helps people do like coffee table books and Bibles and different things, and she works in the Bibles division, and she helps publishers get their Bibles printed overseas. And in this book we have 2 timelines. We have the past timeline where she is like trying to make her way in New York City and she meets this guy, etc., etc., but also the current timeline where everyone has turned into these zombies that repeat actions in their life, like really mundane actions like you know, watering a plant or serving dinner or just random things, and they do that thing until they die. They don't eat or anything, and they just basically rot while doing these things. And so she's one of the last people left alive, and so she finds another group of people, and they try to make their way in this new landscape of zombies and different things. I really struggle with my generation's millennial make your way in New York City novels just because I've read so many of them, and it's very hard to write a fresh book with that perspective. It's also hard to write a fresh book with the like apocalyptic type genre and just different things like that because they're so overdone. Lingma somehow simultaneously recognizes those tropes and that they're overdone while making them fresh at the same time. I don't know how she does it. I want to reread it and figure out how she did that. I'm just blown away by this book. It has all the things that I typically don't like in a book, but they're in here all together at the same time, and I love it. I don't know how that happened. I would love to be able to expound brilliantly on why this book is so fantastic. But I'm going to read you a section and maybe you can figure it out for me. To live in a city is to live the life that was built for, to adapt to its schedules and rhythms, to move within the transit layout made for you during the morning and evening rush, winding through the crowds of fellow commuters. To live in a city is to consume its offerings, to eat at its restaurants, to drink at its bars, to shop at its stores, to pay its sales tax, to give a dollar to its homeless. To live in a city is to take part and to propagate its impossible systems, to wake up, to go to work in the morning. It is also to take pleasure in those systems, because otherwise, who could repeat the same routines year in, year out? So I'm not going to read you anymore because that will give you some spoilers, but I feel like this book critiques the city life that we read so much about and romanticize in our minds, but also celebrates it. These contradictions are what make this book. These contradictions are what are so difficult to achieve, but she does it so well, and I cannot recommend this book enough. So definitely check out Severance by Lingma. The last book on my list became a favorite very, very quickly, and this is an author that has quickly become one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Junpei Likiri's The Namesake. Now this is Junpei Likiri's debut novel, and this is about Gogol, and that is his like pet name or family name, and then he's given like a more formal name, and it's just a series of events where he never actually ends up going by his real name. He has this pet name, which is that of a Russian author for his entire life, but that is a symbol for his identity as the son of Indian immigrants. You know, this actually happened to Junpei Likiri in a strange turn of events, and I found the way that she took her own experiences and loosely used that for the story of this young man who's trying to make his way in a world as an Indian American. I found this book incredibly beautiful. I can't stop thinking about it. I went and immediately rented the movie. I love the movie. It's a little different than the book, but I loved it all because somehow she is able to communicate so much about a character without you even realizing it. You're reading about this character and then you read something else about it and you're like, oh yeah, that character's doing this because they feel X way about this thing. And you're like, how did I know that? How did she put that in the text without me even realizing I was reading something? And this is another book where I want to read it again to figure out how she did it because it's just so well written, it's so well structured, it's a beautiful story that I will remember for the rest of my life. I would highly recommend reading this book and then going watching the movie because there's also an image in the movie that I will never forget. And there's just something so important about this book, about identity, about being, you know, immigrants in America and what that's like and trying to navigate all of that. And it's just perfection. I love this book. I can't really find a fault in this book personally. This is going to be going on my favorite shelf along with Severance because they're just gorgeous. They're wonderful. Beautiful books. So those are my favorite books of 2018. We have a nice little stack here. I'm going to put it down now. So definitely let me know if you've read any of these books, if you love them, what were your favorite 2018 reads. If you have done a video on that, which if you are a booktuber, you probably have, definitely link it down below and I will go watch it. I'm very excited for this time of year and I love these books. I'm very much looking forward to what 2019 has to bring as well. So that's it from me, and I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.